If you're an NRL fantasy coach, do you start with the big guns and spend up big this year, or do you go cheap in the halves? Welcome back to the Casual Athlete, and today we're going to be talking about all those options from the cheapies all the way to the top guns. I'm here, Longy, your host, with Biz. And Biz, mate, what's your approach to the halves this year?
Longy, good to be recording. Look, my approach to the halves this year is very simple. My first two picked, Cleary, Hines, fill up my team after that.
Damn.
Yeah, I want my 70, 75-point scorers in. I know Cleary is more popular this year. Which one would you be picking if you're only going with one of them? Because in my eyes, you need at least one.
Yeah, you have to pick one. You need that top tier captain, so you got to make space for one of these guys. Look, my heart was leaning a bit more towards Cleary. I think he had a few injuries last year. They sort of affected his average. They're about the same price, but I think Cleary could come out hot to start the year. Saying that, going Nico Hines, I don't know. I mean, like, he was affected by Trindle in previous years. There's usually about a 10-point difference, so that's not great for him. But I'm looking at this 15% ownership, and I'm thinking if you want to win fantasy this year, 15% ownership for Nico Hines versus a 50% ownership for Nathan Cleary. It might not be the worst idea to go, hey, I'm just going to get the pod, the guy who's $1 million for a reason, captain him, and maybe get out of the gates fast, or it might not work as well. So initially I was thinking Cleary, but now I'm starting to open up on Hines. Do you have a preference for these guys?
To be honest, I agree. Like you said, with Trindle, Hines is simply just not as good because Trindle does a lot more game play kicking than, say, a Matty Moylan. But when I looked at the scores for Nico Hines, I think Trindle started about 6 or 7 games towards the back end of the year, and Hines still averaged about 69, 70. So that just shows you how good he is when it's Moylan next to him, which means he's probably about 4 or 5 points overvalued. But me thinking that, okay, these two are guys who can score 100, 120 any given week. You can't really time players like these because they're really matchup proof. Like, for example, Cleary's got Melbourne week 1. I think the Sharks have got Warriors week 1. They're both tough matchups based on last year's form, but both of them could come out and score 100. And I want to get the guys who have that capability. If I was picking one, I think Cleary's a safer option, just given the Trindle issue. But look, if you went Hines, like, I'm not talking you out of it. He's a great pick, and he could even improve further this year.
We'll go both. Don't go neither. That's the big lesson there. We rolled in this list, and for me, there's a few guys here that I'm not that interested in. So Daly Tree Evans, it's pretty straightforward, right? The Luke Brooks effect. He comes in. He's a much more dominant 6 than Jacob Arthur, than Cooper Johns, than Josh Schuster, who DC played next to last year. So I think it'll be a good year for Manly and good year for DC on the field, but I'm not seeing him averaging 63. I don't think he'll get 60. I think we're going to see something like 56 this year.
Yeah, I actually think that DC is pretty good. Like, my view is that he could average in the low to mid 60s again because he just keeps doing it. But my view, like, I agree with you that I'm not interested in DC, and it's simply because if I'm spending 877K, I'd rather just spend the extra 130K and get Cleary and Hines. Like, unfortunately, like, it's the kind of same with all the next few names we're going to run through, and Sean Johnson, Moses, etc. Like, they're great players. They're just in an era where there's Cleary and Hines. So why would I pay up for the kind of second tier when the tier 1 is so good?
Yeah, 100%. Look, SJ, it was a blip last year as well. He's not a guy who's averaged above sort of the mid 50s. It was insane. Right? And RTS comes in, that's nice for him. I think he'll play good footy again this year, but 63 average, I would degrade him down to a high 50s average in my head as well. Mitch Moses is one that people are a bit more excited about. And I'm seeing a lot of teams with Moses as captain. Obviously, we're both Para fans, so there's going to be a little bit of bias here. But when the Eels win the comp this year, is Moses going to be a guy who averages 60 plus?
The thing with Moses is he's one of those guys who can have a 5 to 10 game average of 75. But he just seems to have less of those 100, 120 point games that push his average in those mid 70s. I can see Moses doing a DC kind of thing and averaging 63, 64. But even as a massive Moses and Para fan, I just haven't seen enough from him where he can sustain a 70 plus average across a whole season. So again, he's a great pick, but just like the others, if I'm paying up, I'm getting the top 2.
Yep, I'll pay that 100%. And we then moved to the next tier, guys. So Moses was at about 800K. We jumped down to about 685K at this point, and there's some interesting guys between about 500 and about that 700 mark. Sam Walker heads up that list for us. So in my head, these are the guys where I'm looking at them and sort of thinking, all right, you know what? They're priced at around that 50, 45 average. They need to make that leap into the high 50s to really be worthwhile at this price. For a guy like Sam Walker, he's got the tools he needs to do it. So he's a great ball runner. The Chooks have a fantastic roster coming into this year. His outside backs are just stacked in terms of the finishes he has. Like every pass he throws will be leading to a try, basically. So I sort of look at him and go, in a draft league, I'm very interested. In classic, 685K, it's a bit awkward.
Yeah, I think you're right. On paper, this is a great pick. He's still very young, and he should improve a lot. And he had a bit of a bumpy season last year, where he actually came out of the fantasy blocks pretty hot. Like he was one of the top players towards the start, and he kind of all of a sudden got dropped, which I don't think many people are expecting. And he was kind of in and out of the side. He copped a couple of injuries, which kind of prolonged his absence. The thing with Sam Walker is he's already priced at 50, right? So he's talented enough to go to 60 plus mark, but you got to remember that Kiri's still pretty dominant playmaker. And I think it's definitely going to skew towards Walker as Kiri gets older. And it's probably this is going to be the first year where Kiri's the main guy. Sam Walker's the main guy, and it was kind of aiming towards it last year. But at 685K, unless you think he can average 60 plus, you just have to pass, which is unfortunate because I'd love to own a guy like Sam Walker in my team. Just like you said, he's just fun to watch, and any of his passes or plays can turn into something. Yeah, he makes some brain dead plays as well, but he's just one of those kind of players who has that just big playability.
Yeah, pure highlight reel. Probably more of a super coach pickup this year, actually. Like if I was playing super coach seriously, that's where I'd go. The next two guys are more interesting to me. So you got Burton and Fogarty, which you could probably speak about them both quite similarly. But for Matt Burton, I was on him last year, and he had some good games. He had some very quiet games. Overall, it was a pretty disappointing season for him in fantasy. Look, when I look at this guy, I think, all right, you've got a guy who theoretically could replicate Dylan Brown's stat line with the addition of long kicking in there, right? So he has all the tools he needs to be a 60 average half, and he's priced at 46. Whether he does that is more based on who's his partner with in the halves, and are the Dogs going to be okay this year? Because if it's Drew Hutchison or Toby Sexton, one of these guys, they're going to take a lot of work off him. But at the same time, 2.9% ownership, I don't mind this as a pod.
Yeah, I think the problem with Burton is there was a point last year when I was bringing a half, and it was either Sean Johnson or Matt Burton, and at that point there was only 30K apart. Sean Johnson just exploded. I got talked into Sean Johnson. Thank God for that. But Burton is a guy that has. I look at him. I look at the way he plays, the role he has. Everything is set up for him to be a gun. But for some reason, there's some games where he does really good playmaking, but he doesn't run the ball. There's some games where he's excellent at running the ball, but he's not doing playmaking. So guys like Hines, Cleary, DC, they consistently do both very well. And Burton just hasn't shown it. But in flipping that script, he just really hasn't had the tools to succeed at the Dogs. Like they just haven't been good, right? This is the year where if it still goes poorly, then you've got to start asking questions as to whether he can carry a team because he's got plenty of talent around him. They've got a good forward pack. They've got a really good back line. They've got a good mix of young talent and vets. If you are a big Burton fan, this is the year where I think if you're a believer, he could go to 60 average. Do I think so? No. But I can see a Burton fan saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting sent a lot of teams with him in them, and I'm very happy to say, yeah, keep him. It's a good pod. A guy who's less of a pod, 10% more ownership. He's at 13%. Jamal Fogarty, and this is a pretty straightforward formula, right? He's priced at about that 46 average. Over his career, he's averaged between 49 and 55, typically. You lose Jack Whiten, you lose Jared Croker. He gains all of the dominant playmaking duties and the goal kicking. So theoretically, it should be a very strong base behind a strong Raiders forward pack. If they can be better than expected, this could even be a 60 average kind of conversation. But if the Raiders struggle, it's probably going to be in that low 50s area. So there's probably about 5 to 9 points of value in this, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I can see Jamal's season going two ways. He can do the 2023 burden, where he's just kind of pretty good but not getting up there, or he could be the 2023 Sean Johnson, and he just has a crazy amount of base stats. His team is doing much better than expected, and all of a sudden he's averaging 60. Because you're right, he's going to get the goals like Sean Johnson.
Yeah.
He's going to get high kick meter as a base stat like Sean Johnson. If his team can all of a sudden be better than we're expecting, like the Warriors last year, then there's no reason why Fogg doesn't have the tools to go to a 60 average. But for me, it's one of those things at 637K. I'm skipping him because, like, I know people are saying Wyden are leaving, but my thoughts are with Wyden leaving. Wyden only averaged about 160 kick meters last year. So even if you have Weeks or Strange next to him, even if they're not doing much kicking, you're actually not gaining that much. It's improbable to think that getting 0 kick meters, they're probably getting at least 100 kick meters, right? Like, that's only 2 or 3 long kicks a game. So you're only really picking up maybe a few more points there. And yes, you're getting goals, but Wyden was a large part of the Raiders' attack. So you're actually getting worse in attack. So, my view is that I can see him gaining 5 to 10 points, but at this kind of high mid-range price, when I'm high on Cleary and Hines, I'm skipping.
Yeah, you're right. If you gain that 5 to 10, it's not 5 to 10 every week either. It's not like he'll just instantly come out and go, all right, I'm scoring 55 now. You're still going to get those 37s. You're still going to get those 65s. Like, it's going to bounce around. So if you're picking him, you sort of have to set and forget for a while. And if you're not, then don't be fooled by the big scores. This next group here is a bit more about, can they take the leap? Can they take on a new role? Sort of conversation. So a bit less statistical, I would say, when we look at these guys. But Luke Brooks is the first one here. He goes from being a dominant half at the Tigers to being the submissive half at Manly. 3.3% ownership is not a lot there. And the reason for that is he's probably going to be playing that supporting role. If he's going to do well this year, for mine, it's going to be attacking stat based. It's going to be a lot of run meters, a lot of tackle breaks, a lot of assists, and that kind of thing. And to be honest, Manly do have a lot of the weapons that could support that. So there is potential for that, but at 41.9, he's a skip for me.
By attacking weapons, I assume you mean Tommy Talau outside him, right?
We're not getting into Talau. We're not getting into Talau. You're banned from the channel. You're done, Biz. This is you finished.
All right.
I'm sorry.
But I actually, so if you review the trial performance last weekend, and I didn't get to see the game, but from all reports, Luke Brooks played in the first half and he was a class above everyone else. Yeah, I agree. He's not going to get much of the base stats. He's not going to get 400, 500 kick meters a game. That's still Cherry Evans' sweet spot. But he could get a lot more attacking stats because he's been on the Tigers, who've been a very poor team for many years now, whereas he's going to a Manly team who people are kind of getting hotter on as the preseason goes on. And apparently he set up Ben Trebojevic for a hat-trick over the weekend. And yes, they were playing an understrength team, and it doesn't count. Yes, preseason. I couldn't care less what happens in preseason. But it's just a potential highlight reel where you could see him kind of maybe doing a Dylan Brown sort of role where, okay, he's not getting base stats, but he's just going to run the ball a lot more. Because everyone, like all commentators, all experts have been saying Brooks needs to take. He's actually a good runner of the ball. He's quick, he's shifty, he's got a good footwork. So his role this year is to do less of the playmaking and more of the running. There is a chance where he can be pretty good. Again,
physically though, can he hold up to that Dylan Brown role? Like, is he? Because Dylan Brown runs the ball. It's like 100.
And he tackles. Yeah, and he tackles. That's what. My next point is that's like the ultimate upside case. Can he get there? Like, the thing is, Luke Brooks is not a youngster anymore. He's been in the league for a while, and I'm not saying that he's not old, but we've seen a lot of Brooks, so it's hard to see him becoming a gun all of a sudden.
I'm taking this as a sign, by the way, mate. Your light just turned off. That's the lights out.
My ideas are bad. All right, see you.
Yeah, Brooks is done. He's finished for me. That was a sign. Do not pick Luke Brooks. Could be a pick for Supercoach. That's what I'm going to say again. Like, he's one of those guys where the attacking stats come through for Supercoach, but fantasy, it's not that interesting. If I was going to take an attacking running 6 at that price bracket, I actually like Dearden a lot more. So he went from about a 42 average last year to a 38 average in 1 year. So you got about 4 points of value in that regard, just because the Cowboys were really weak last year. They will probably be better this year. They're in my top 8. And you throw in the fact that he gets the captaincy as well. He's one of those guys where he's got the tools he needs to move into that sort of mid 40s, maybe high 40s conversation, but he'd need to play very, very good footy to be in that conversation. So I'm skipping him for now, but he's a guy I'm keeping an eye on in draft leagues.
Yeah, I think he's more of a draft pick. Like same with Brooks. Like I know I hyped him up, but these are guys where we've just talking both sides of the envelope in terms of they could be really good, but if you just look at their averages and situation, the only way they get good is to have a huge leap of form. And I think Dearden can do it and Brooks can do it, but I just don't think that they've got that statistical pedigree. So yeah, on draft list, but I'm skipping for fantasy.
Done deal. And then Aiden Caesar, next one up for the Tigers. For mine, he was never that impressive for fantasy before he left. He comes into a dominant role, but I'm not that interested in this one. Do you have much interest in Caesar?
Nah, I mean, he had that one good year when he first came out, and then he kind of just deteriorated. He's also got the buy round one, and so it's like you kind of have 477k half sitting there, the first round one buy. So skip him. I think that's an easy one.
Skip there. Ezra Mann's another one. Look, 32 average for him is really interesting. I was looking at him and thinking, can he make the leap? And there's a few stats that can improve. So you have 4.5 missed tackles a game. Maybe he comes out this year and drops that down to about 3 missed tackles a game. And that's, what's that, about 3 points added to his average. You then throw in, he's about 99 meters a game. So again, as a pure running 6, Dylan Brown is about 40 meters above that. Maybe he jumps another 2 points there, another 20 meters, something like that. The attacking stats, he could probably find a few more try assists and that kind of thing as he gets more involved because he's being paid like a Cody Walker or a Dylan Brown caliber 6 now. So he's probably going to start stepping up into that role. I could find little incremental things to improve his average, but at the same time, he kicks the ball 19 meters a game. Like he does not kick the ball at all. So I look at him and go, the upside here is that he has some really big games in attack and maybe gets to 600k at some point, but he's almost a cash cow in my mind. Like there's nothing there that's going to make him a season-long keeper.
Yeah, I think I'm actually very surprised that his average last year was 33. Like I actually kind of slipped under the radar because when I thought about his play last year, he seemed like one of those low 40s guys. So him being at 33 average is really strange to me because he's a good runner of the ball, right? And that's usually a good sign for
He's like a defensive neutral, man. Like he gets 3 points from defense. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, look, until they move on from Reynolds, I feel like if Reynolds moved on and they hand the keys to Mam, he could be a 50-plus guy. But until that happens, it's
look, nothing wrong with him. He's developing. He's a young guy. But fantasy skip for me, but he could have those big games as well. Jaden Sullivan, this is a hard skip for me. I just don't think he's shown anything when he's been in the halves. I'd need to see some crazy preseason form. Are you considering Sullivan at all?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't even know if he's really gone in. Like, there's too many questions around the halves because you've got young Finu there as well. They've got this other kid who's been named on the bench, Galvin, I believe his name is. I'd never heard of him until he got named in these trials, and maybe I would do better tracking the young guys. But I looked him up, and there were articles from last year saying that he's the next Cleary and that they're really big on him, and he's been playing in that position while Sullivan's been injured in the preseason, and that he's been really doing well. So I don't even know because they've got potential 2 young guns who are coming through. Again, round 1 bye, which makes him a no-go. Skip for me. He does have potential, though.
Hard skip. Keep an eye on Galvin. Josh Schuster, I'm cooling off on this one as we move into the season. Look, he's being paid like a guy who's going to get minutes, but Ben Trbojevic just keeps scoring hat-tricks in preseason games. It was 1 hat-trick, but every preseason game so far, he's scored a hat-trick. And Schuster just keeps picking up niggles. He's on the extended bench, I think it is, for this week. So I'm probably still going to do it. But if he's on the bench for round 1, I don't know. I mean, there's a chance he could play that 60 minutes off the bench. It doesn't look great.
You couldn't do it at 408k. I'm so surprised. We discussed him in one of our last previous podcasts, and we were like, surely Ben Trbojevic isn't keeping that role. But man, they sound like they want to play Trbojevic there, and they keep saying he's having a great preseason. Like you said, a hat trick in the trial. Like I said, I don't care about trials, but He's been named this week in their second trial on the bench with Ben Trebojevic starting. So it's not looking good for him. But he's had an injury-plagued preseason, so maybe they're easing him into it. But,
they're resting the starters. Because him and Stuart Wong's on that bench as well. So we'll talk about that in the Edge video.
Yeah. But I'm
Brent
cooling
Ham's
off on him slowly.
Yeah, he's sliding off. Kyle Flanagan, we talked about him in the cash cows, but look, he's a 40-plus average kind of guy, so that's pretty straightforward. And then KO Weeks and Finu. Finu's, I believe he's serving suspension this week. That's why he's not in the trial game. But again, just another one to keep an eye on. Biz, I want you to jump back here and tell me, other than Cleary and Hines, who is your number one pick in the halves spot?
Well, I'm happy to tell you what my halves are. So right now, my halves are Cleary, Hines, and Kyle Flanagan. And that's kind of my approach to fantasy is I will stack up and have some really cheap guys at the back. And I've said it in every video. I don't like mid-rangers. So as soon as we got past maybe Moses, until we're getting to Brendan Hands and Flanagan, everyone, I don't even look at them. Unless there's like some superstar highlight that they could go from a 35 to a 50 average. So I'm just not interested. Like, I just want the guaranteed points of Cleary and Hines. I know I'm going to get 70 plus from them most weeks. And Kyle Flanagan, I'm hoping he can give me 35 off the bench, 40, and plug in and play if Cleary and Hines have a bye. And the good thing about like this strategy, like my thoughts are, if Cleary and Hines get injured for more than a couple of weeks, I can trade them to anyone. So I'm not too worried about the depth, right? And if they're gone for 1 week, like Kyle Flanagan's good enough to cover them. So that's my overall strategy. I think if you're not going Cleary or Hines, well, I mean, you can't have Flanagan as your starting half probably. So if I wasn't going Cleary or Hines, I'd probably go Cherry Evans because I think he's the next best. But anyone after below Moses and Sean Johnson to Flanagan, I'm not really interested in. Except Brendan.
We see it a little differently. We see it a little differently, man. Like, so I've got Cleary right now. I'm starting to soften to Hines. I like some of the fixtures that he has. I think the pod is really fun as well. And I play to win fantasy. I don't play to sort of get a respectable rank. So, you know, I look at that and think that's kind of interesting.
You remind us every time because you keep having the Fantasy Champ 2013 in your moniker.
Man, I've got to remind everyone because no one was alive when it happened.
You don't want to be me. I could just be Paraprodigy brackets multiple top XYZ finishes. It doesn't sound as impressive as Fantasy Champ.
Perennial top 100 finisher, mate. But I'm looking very closely at Fogarty and Burton. And I just think that trying to pick that next leap guy is really worthwhile. And if you get it right, you have such a big reward and you get such a head start on everyone else. And if you get it wrong, there's not a lot of chance those guys go down in value. So you might just have to figure something out and get rid of them. But yeah, I'll be probably going, I'm probably going to switch to Hines actually after talking to you. So I'm going to go Hines, probably Fogarty and Flanagan at this stage, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, it's good to hear two different thoughts because that's why we're here. We're here to debate, and I'm looking forward to it. I feel like the halves is the one position that I'm not really going to care too much about trials. Like, even if Burton and Fogg and those guys go gangbusters and Cleary and Hines do terribly, I'm still going to stick with Cleary and Hines unless they get hurt or suspended. So it's like the trio I'm pretty set on. So yeah, let's see how the preseason goes. I'm excited for this weekend, the first set of like proper preseason trials.
It's so good. So good. We just did a team list analysis as well. Had a look at the rookies in those games too. So check that out. Check out the other videos. We do every single position here. If you want to win your fantasy league, this is the channel to be on. So make sure to subscribe and drop a comment. Let us know who you're picking in the halves.